With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here tonight live in the Bourbon Life studios, it is my good friend, my beanie-wearing buddy, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there in front of the Bourbon Life fireplace?
Oh, Mark, I am good. This is, the first episode of autumn 2023, breaking out the beanie here. It's finally chilly enough here in Kentucky.
Yeah, man. It's crazy. I was on vacation last week in Florida, and it was beautiful. It was right at 80 degrees every day, sunshine, no rain whatsoever, and drove home Sunday. And it was rainy and 61 degrees here. And today, I think we didn't even get to 50 degrees in Lexington. So I'm just going to give it up and go back to the beach, Matt, and figure out how to do the bourbon life from somewhere on the beach. I think that might be my best bet.
Yeah, I think you found what you needed down there, and you brought this crap back with you. Thanks for that.
Yeah, you can blame me for it, Matt. You know,
no,
so,
it's all right.
Man, we got a fun show lined up tonight. It's a little bit, it's going to be different than what we normally do, but I'm looking forward to this. This is something that is really captured my attention, and I'm really excited to get into this. But before we jump into it, I do want to thank all of our sponsors. We appreciate everything that they do for us, because obviously we could not do this show without their help and their support. So with that said, Matt, would you like to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
I would. Joining us tonight, or you all this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever it is you get your Bourbon Life podcast on, is the CEO of ZBiotics, Zack Abbott. Zack, welcome on to the Bourbon Life podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, man. We're excited to have you, Zack. You and I got to talk about a month or so ago, and I was just intrigued with what you're doing, man. So I've just, I thought we got to get this guy on the show. And people are probably thinking, ZBiotics, what's that? They see the promotion for this and they're like, ZBiotics, what liquor brand is that? what's that distillery? So I think it might be best, just before we jump into everything that we're going to be doing tonight, Zack, can you just kind of tell everybody a little bit about what the product is, what we're going to be talking about tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. So ZBiotics is basically, it's this beverage. So it's a small half-ounce probiotic shot that you drink before you drink alcohol. And it helps break down one of the toxic metabolic byproducts of alcohol that makes you feel not so great. And so that you can wake up the next day and feel better than you would have felt otherwise. So we'll get into details. I know the product in general, but just to point out that proprietary ingredient here is something that we invented. It's a genetically engineered probiotic. It's the world's first and still only genetically engineered probiotic on the market. So excited to dive into some of the science around drinking and alcohol, and how this product was built and designed to kind of help people enjoy their bourbon or whatever else they might be drinking and still be able to get on with their day the next day.
Yeah, no doubt. It's great.
With that, I'll probably, since we're going to be tasting some, I might actually just take one to begin with to get started too.
Very nice. Well, I have to admit, because I have my pack here as well. So I drank one myself probably about 15 minutes ago, Zack. So, it's kind of funny because Dave Mandel connected us together. And David reached out to me probably about 2 months ago and just said, Mark, this is a great product. You got to talk to this guy. You got to get on board. You got to hear what this guy's doing. You got to hear what this company's about. And here's the thing about David. He co-founded Bardstown Bourbon Company. They just announced the whiskey house that he and Johnny Hargrove are doing. Everything that David does kind of pretty much turns to gold. So when Dave Mandel says there is something out there that you need to be aware of, I'm like, it's like when E.F. Hutton talks, those old commercials. You guys are probably too young to remember those, but it's like when Dave Mandel talks, I'm going to listen. So he was like, you got to connect with Zack. So I'm glad. I appreciate David connecting us. And David is a believer in this product. So yeah, man, I'm happy you did that, and I appreciate you guys sending samples for us to enjoy as well. And we'll dive into this a little bit, obviously deeper, so people can understand exactly what this is all about. But before we do that, let's talk about what we're gonna be drinking tonight as well, obviously. So we got something poured up on the first round here. Matt, I think you might have the bottle.
I do have
out there, correct?
The bottle out here.
Yeah.
We have.
And Matt, yeah, you just tell everybody, man, because this was like your gateway bourbon when you started, right?
Yeah, it was back when I was starting to develop my palate for bourbon and enjoying it a little bit more. This was one of the first ones, really, maybe the first one I can really remember enjoying and finding I had a real taste and a like for. And this is just regular classic. I guess my screen is backwards here, but old Basil Hayden.
No, I can see it. I think it's coming through clear the right way.
Okay, well, it's backward on mine. Basil Hayden from Jim Beam, now the James B. Beam Distilling Company.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, make sure you get the corrected official name, the James B. Beam Distilling Company.
So 80 proof. This is a higher-ish rye bourbon, non-age stated. Just Basil Hayden. It's a classic, been around forever. Everybody has had an experience with it, whether some like me, it was eye-opening, or for others, they kind of look down their noses at it. But anyway, it's what we've got poured up for our first round.
Yeah, and it's funny, Matt, because we talk to a lot of people, and for a lot of people that we do talk to, Basil Hayden was really one of the first bourbons that they really got into. And that's really what led them down the road to getting into bourbon was Basil Hayden. So you are obviously not alone on that journey. But like you said, Matt, this is I think it's 63 corn, 27 rye, 10 malted barley. So this is a higher rye mash bill. It's the same mash bill as the Old Granddad, which is the Old Granddad 114, which is one of my favorite bargain budget bourbons at $29 a bottle. I don't think you can beat that. It's excellent. So Matt, what do you pick up on the nose on this Basil Hayden?
Yeah, it's been quite some time since we've had just regular Basil Hayden, and kind of forgetting how much I enjoy it. It's got a nice sweet nose. There's a good amount of honey, a little bit of like honey graham cracker, almost like a crispy like cornflake note coming across on it as well. Then I think the high rye is starting to come out more as it plays in the glass. There's some of the mint is coming across as a little bit herbal. So some nice minty, kind of mentholic notes on there as well.
Yeah, the corn comes through, Matt. I agree with that. And there's that spiciness, or not spiciness, but the mintiness comes through as well, like you said. It's just a pleasant aroma, and there's sweetness to it that comes through as well. It's not the high rye, or it's not a super high corn content, but there's still 63% corn in there. Mm-hmm. So you're still going to expect to get some of that sweetness. And I've seen somewhere that this is supposedly around 8 years old. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. And especially with all the product, this is part of their small batch collection. So I don't know for sure, Matt, if it's really that old or not, but I mean, I'd believe it. Of course, it's proof down to 80 proof, so it's going to lose some of that potency. So, Zack, what about you? Do you get any unique elements on that as you nose it, or?
I mean, I trust recipes a lot more than my own, but for me, I smell a little bit of vanilla in that as well, a little bit.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
Sort of the sweetness, sort of vanilla caramel, a little bit of that.
Yeah. It's a classic type of bourbon, and I think that's really. That makes this a great, we joke and call it a gateway bourbon, but it has a lot of those bourbon characteristics that it's a nice introduction for people. But it's at such a lower proof, that 80 proof point, really is appealing for a lot of people. So, well, Zack, let's jump back and talk about you some.
Well, actually, I'd say that, to dive in on that a little bit for a second, which could be a good introduction to me as well. It is kind of a gateway for me as well. So one of my favorite when I was doing my PhD at Michigan in microbiology, one of my favorite professors that I spent time with, he always had a bottle of Basil Hayden in the drawer at his desk, and so we call you in to have a conversation about something. Maybe it was a Thursday or Friday afternoon. He'd pull out the bottle, and so this was kind of one of my first experiences of like sipping bourbon and enjoying bourbon. So yeah.
Very cool, man. That's a great memory to have. No doubt about it. And of course, you're a PhD student at the time. You're a professional. You're allowed to drink on the job, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's part of the discussion.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So tell us a little bit, about your background, who you are and where you're from and your educational background, which you kind of alluded to there, but your work experience as well, everything that makes you who you are.
Yeah. So I guess I'm from California. I grew up in Sacramento, and then went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, and studied science there. I studied immunology, but I also kind of didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I also double majored in classical history. I really liked classics and Greece and Romans, and so did an archaeological dig among other things. I really enjoyed that a lot, but recognized that I wasn't sure how to turn that into a career more than just kind of a passion or a hobby. So the science was a clear path, for that. And so spent some time doing various things. Actually, I was a bartender for a little while and some other things, but then got back into science and did worked in environmental chemistry a little bit, but I knew that biology was really my passion. And so I ended up working at a HIV lab at UC Davis studying HIV. And then decided I want to go back to grad school, get a PhD, and I was really interested in microbes and bacteria and viruses. And so I applied for microbiology PhDs and ended up going to Michigan, which was a blast, going to the Midwest, which is not an area I was really familiar with. I spent most of my life in California, and then heading out to the Midwest and kind of living that life was phenomenal, and definitely introduced to a whole different way of thinking through, enjoying alcohol that was different than California, the way Californians do it. Less on like the heavy IPAs and more on like darker alcohols and enjoying like, a lot of good bourbon. So we're a lot closer to kind of bourbon country at that point. And so, but enjoyed that in my PhD, enjoyed doing my PhD a lot, spent my time, I studied bacteria and basically how bacteria regulate, their genomes and the way that they express different traits in different conditions. So thinking about like bacteria is in kind of a place where there's a lot of nutrients versus when they're in a place where they're kind of under attack or there's scarcity, and how they turn on and off different things. And so really, really interesting. A lot of people in my PhD in microbiology were really into home brewing and winemaking and distilling. And so, it's kind of one of the age-old applications of microbiology, which is phenomenal. And so I had a lot of fun kind of dabbling in all that stuff as well. And then after my PhD, I spent some time working at a contract research organization, actually down in Florida, where you were recently. And we were designing clinical trials for drug companies. And so, people would come to us and say that they had this exciting new drug candidate and they wanted to do the clinical trials and start bringing it to market. And so we would do the research to determine like how to design that trial and how to recruit the patients and kind of where to place the trial and all that kind of stuff. And so that was a lot of fun. I learned a ton about how you bring new biology to market. And then, after that, I recognized that while I really enjoyed that, I wanted to do something a little different than drug development. So thinking of like how we could apply biotechnology to our healthy everyday lives. And so that's when I started ZBiotics.
Very cool. So you've had quite a career already. I mean, you're obviously a young guy, but you've had a very cool career so far. And speaking of Michigan, Matt is from Michigan himself. So
oh, cool.
Yeah, Matt's like, yeah.
I loved it there. It was phenomenal.
Yeah. So that's Matt. You're from Ann Arbor, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm from Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
Oh, you're from Ann Arbor. Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, that's where I was, and I loved it.
Yeah. I was going to chat with you a little bit about that between off the air between our next two segments here. So
we'll play the do you know game.
Yeah.
Oh man. So here you got this career, you're doing all these different things, and then what was it then that made you say, "Hey, I want to create this this new drink, this ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink.
Yeah.
What was it that made you? How did that come about?
Totally. Yeah. So, the idea really was that I was, really excited about the potential of bacteria. And so when I started my PhD, I was much more focused on disease, and like we often think of bacteria and viruses as like causing disease, but the vast majority of bacteria are, generally neutral or if beneficial for people. And it's only a small percentage that cause disease. And so as I kind of, got a better understanding of bacteria, I recognized that, there was a huge opportunity here to do good with bacteria rather than just fight the bad. And so, for instance, you have this community of bacteria that live in your gut, called the microbiome, and you have as many bacterial cells in your gut as you do human cells in your whole body. And so, as a numbers game, you're as much bacteria as you are human. And these bacteria perform all these really amazing and incredible functions on your behalf. And it was that to me was really fascinating. And so then thinking about like, how could we leverage that to help healthy people be healthier? At first I was thinking about sort of the drug industry and building drugs and helping sick people get better. And I think that that's a really valuable use of biotechnology, but there's also this opportunity to kind of prevent problems in the first place by making products for kind of healthy people to live healthier, fuller lives. And so thinking about probiotics, and so probiotics are these safe bacteria that you can eat. And generally speaking, these bacteria perform all of these biological functions, and most of them are for the benefit of the bacteria. And then occasionally they sort of have these like tangentially, these functions could maybe have some benefit to you. And so like generally speaking, the probiotics industry is predicated on the idea that like, hey, eat this safe bacteria and maybe some of the things it does will help you in some way. And I thought we could do better than that with modern science. We could take the bacteria and we could genetically engineer it so that it performed one specific function in addition to everything else it was already naturally doing. And that specific function, that extra function, we could program to be sure that it would be valuable to you. And then you could eat this probiotic and it would perform that function as it passed through your gut. And that function would be useful to you. And then you'd pass out the other side and you'd have this so we would basically be refining this probiotic bacteria to do something that we know would provide you with value. So that was sort of like the concept behind ZBiotics. But then it was like, okay, then what is that function? What is that benefit we want to create? And so as I started kind of like, walking around with this hammer looking for a nail, like what's this opportunity here that we could do with this tech? And I, as a scientist, originally I pitched some interesting scientific ideas that were objectively bad business ideas, for the application of the tech. But I almost, and then, I kind of threw out this idea of like something that would maybe help you feel better the day after drinking, almost as like a joke the first time. I was like, yeah, we could even like, make a product that, broke down the byproduct of alcohol so you could feel better the day after drinking. And people were like, really got really excited and they like really understood the problem. And it made me realize like getting out of my like sort of like nerdy scientist mode, recognizing that if we have this technology that I think can be totally game changing in terms of the way that people engage with the world, it should be something, if we're going to introduce that technology to people, it should be something that they understand and they care about. And so people were like interested. It's like this like age old problem that seems like there isn't a real solution out there for it. And people like, can you actually do that? Can you actually help me feel better? And does that actually work? And like, yeah, like the science of biochemistry is pretty clear here. We could build something that did that. And so that's what we did. We built something new and exciting and different. And so we basically just took a probiotic and programmed it to break down acetaldehyde. And that would help you feel better the day after drinking.
And that one thing what I really find very cool about this is that you think about medicine, you think about, taking things, most people are reactive to issues. It's like you wait until you get sick. Or you wait until there's an issue and then you do something to try to solve it. But what you're doing is you're taking something and saying, hey, we can create a proactive solution ahead of time that can work with you and help you maintain, your lifestyle, what you're doing, help you feel good at the same time. And I really like that you approached it from that aspect, not like, oh my, moving out of the whole, the pharmaceutical aspect of things and moving into this, where you're taking a probiotic, like you said, and engineering it to where it's going to be helpful, and be able to work with people to solve a problem that could potentially come up. I mean, that's just really cool.
I mean, absolutely. And I think, the important thing there was that, what I was really excited about was the idea that we could use modern biotechnology in a way and get people excited about that, right? That it's good that people are using this technology to help people who are sick. Right. That being said, there is a lot of people out there who want to be proactive about their health, and they're investing in these supplements and products off the shelf and these probiotics, and they aren't maybe necessarily as good as they could be, right? We have technology that can make them better. And I felt like, this was an opportunity for, in one fell swoop, to make products that help people and gave them, the power that they desired over their own kind of life and their health in a proactive sense. And also communicated the benefit of biotechnology and bioengineering, right? We hear a lot of there's a lot of debate and a lot of bad blood around GMOs and for good reason in a lot of parts, that that technology hasn't been applied in ways that people have been excited about. And that being said, there's a lot of good that can be done with that technology too. And so the idea that we could build things that people could engage with and experience the benefit of for themselves was an opportunity to kind of elevate this conversation around genetic engineering and GMOs in a way that I felt like people would appreciate, right? If we use that technology to make something you want, then maybe we could kind of have a more rational conversation around the tech. So that was the idea.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. So I'll tell you what, good opportunity to jump back and talk about the whiskey a little bit here. Matt, you just took a sip. What did you pick up? I know you said it's been a while since you've visited with this. We had the malted rye, the brand new Basil Hayden malted rye a few episodes ago, but it's kind of fun to go back to the OG and check out the Basil Hayden. So what do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
It's got a nice creamy vanilla on the front of the palate that I have always associated with this. I think maybe that's one of the reasons it really took me when I was such a younger drinker. Is it just has this really inviting sweet vanilla flavor that kind of lends beyond that into the sweetness of the corn. There's kind of that corn flake or cornbread type aroma. Then some of the pepper comes in. It's the peppercorns, and there's some dark fruit in it as well. Just a really inviting, really, really nice, kind of easy to drink, flavorful bourbon.
Yeah, I like the rye spice. Comes through. The rye comes through on the palate. The finish to me, it comes through kind of spicy, which I enjoy. And Matt, I know you're a high rye guy, but at 80 proof, going back to that whole kind of basic beginner type of bourbon, yeah, you're going to get the experience of a high rye bourbon, but you're not going to, it's not going to melt your face off because it's 120 proof at the same time as being a high rye bourbon. I think that's a problem that drinkers sometimes face, is they're not used to drinking a higher rye bourbon, and it's a higher proof at the same time. So you get that combination of the alcohol plus the spice from the rye. And I think that combination turns some people off. But with this, you get that 80 proof, it makes it easier it makes it more palatable from the alcohol standpoint, but you can still get that spiciness from the rye, which is really cool. So Zach, what about you? Anything on the palate and finish for you that stands out?
Yeah, I think, I think y'all said it all. I couldn't agree more that it's, really enjoyable because it's a really smooth drink and, nice bit of spice though and a bit of rye to it, which makes it really interesting. It's not just kind of like the sweet bourbon. So I really, really appreciate it a lot. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'll tell you what, why don't we take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll come back with more with Zack Abbott, the CEO with ZBiotics, in just a minute. Hey everybody, it's Mark with the Bourbon Life. And hey, let's face it, after a night with drinks, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. I have to make a choice. I can either have a great night or a great next day. That is until I found ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Prebiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/bourbon to get 15% off your first order when you use bourbon at checkout.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here live in the Bourbon Life studios, otherwise known as my basement, it is my good friend, my bourbon drinking buddy, Matt. Matt, how are you doing out there in the green room?
I'm great. The fireplace is roaring. Got a great show going on tonight. Got the beanie on. It's all is good in the Bourbon Life studios this evening.
Yeah, we're having a good time too, man. We're kind of going off the beaten path on this episode, but you know what? We are not afraid to take on some challenges and some different adventures, man. So I've been looking forward to doing this show for the last few weeks, especially having sampled the product and utilized its benefits. So I'm really happy to get this show and have our guest tonight. But before we jump into that, I do want to thank all our sponsors. So thank you guys for everything you do for us. We couldn't do the show without your help and support, and we really appreciate it. Matt, with that said, would you like to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. We are actually talking science for once, which Mark and I are already a little bit on the back foot. We get into science here. But we have joining us the CEO of ZBiotics, Zack Abbott. Zack, welcome on back for the second round of the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Oh, man, I'm having a blast. Yeah, thanks so much.
Awesome, man. And I have to tell everybody, usually, when we have guests on, especially guests that aren't in the industry like this, I always like to send samples out and make sure we're all drinking the same thing. And with my vacation last week and the week before that, getting ready to go on vacation, I completely neglected to get something together. So Zack and I, we scrambled today. We came up with 3 things. So kind of a hodgepodge, which is great. I mean, sometimes that's the funnest experience to sit and just drink a collection of different things. So I appreciate Zack, you working with me to get those done so we can all enjoy some pours together.
Oh yeah,
tonight.
It was great. Dug through the bar, found my bourbons, and I'm glad we had some matches.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you in the first round. I forgot to do this. Are you a bourbon drinker? I know you said you drink some with your professor when you're in your PhD program, but is that something you normally would drink, or are you more of a Scotch guy, or do you prefer other alcohol? Or
no, I mean, as far as liquors go, I mean, bourbon is definitely my favorite. I wouldn't call myself a connoisseur, but I definitely enjoy bourbon. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good. We welcome you to the fold.
It's good to be here. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. So, Matt, let's tell everybody what we're drinking. I guess I've got the bottle on this one, so we'll jump into
putting me. Yeah,
we'll jump into this. We got the Legent. I'm going to call it Legent. And there's part of me that wants to call it Legent. I don't know why, but Legent, which is a Beam Suntory product. It is the blend of bourbons that was put together as Fred No. I think Fred actually picked the bourbons. And then they were finished in wine and sherry casks. And then I can't remember this guy's name. I always messed it up. He's like the master or the chief blender for Suntory, Shinji Fukuyo with Suntory. His job is to blend. So he took the products that Fred had, the bourbon that Fred had picked. They've aged them in sherry and wine casks, and then Shinji then blended this, and they came up with Legend. So they just put out another release of this, Matt, that I've got a bottle of, and actually haven't even cracked it yet.
Huh.
I can't remember Yamazaki. I can't remember. I have to look. But they just put out another release of this, so I'm curious to see what that one's like. But yeah, so this is 2 True Legends. So they called it Legend. But again, it's Beam Suntory product, which is funny because Basil Hayden is also a Beam.
Yeah.
Product. So we're kind of on the Beam kick tonight, right? Which that's not too odd for us because we seem to end up there a lot of times. But Matt, what do you pick up on the nose on this one, man?
Forgot how much I really love the nose on this product. It's been quite some time since we had it.
It's been a while since we've had this.
Yeah,
man.
The nose is really bold and sweet. A lot of fruit, just a lot of red wine fruits, a lot of plum, fig. There's a little bit of apricot. There's some of the brighter fruits in there. A little bit of berries, like a touch of cherry, almost even like some crisp apple. Just really, really nice fruity flavors on it. The bourbon plays a little bit in there too. Like there's some of the sweetness, some of the vanilla, a little bit of the barrel influence too. I think this one, as opposed to the Basil Hayden, some of the oak comes to play a little bit on the nose as well. But just really nice, just like a really kind of luscious bourbon. Very, very noticeable that it's been finished, I think, in another barrel or had some extra influence just based on the nose, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think what I saw research-wise, and I don't know, again, you can't always trust the internet, according to Abe Lincoln. I think that's his quote, right?
You're doing science, doing science over there?
Yeah, you can't do, you can't. Anyway, it's 5 years old, supposedly, and it's a blend of, I think, 60% finished in wine cask and 40% finished in sherry casks. But my understanding, I think it's actually 3 different bourbons. But I mean, it seems to me that Beam would probably only have their one bourbon, I don't know, mash bill. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily correct. It could be maybe 3 different ages of bourbon that are blended into this, possibly. But Matt, I agree with you. Those fruits come out, and that's coming from those, the sherry and the wine cask. It's not overwhelming. That's the good thing. I think sometimes when you get a bourbon or a rye or something that's finished in some type of a wine cask, you're going to get, or sherry cask, you can get overblown with that. I think this is a nice subtle aromas, like you said, Matt, those different fruits that come through, those darker red fruits, berries, like you said as well. But then you do get the bourbon aromas, which is really nice. It's got a beautiful color on it as well. Really, really enjoy the color on this one. So yeah, so far, I mean, I haven't had this in, I don't know how long, Matt. I think we reviewed this like in our first season.
Yeah.
So
I think this was with Mary Ann
Barnes. That's right, man. And I don't think I've touched it since then, which I hate to say, but Zach, what do you think? What do you pick up? Anything on the nose on this?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm listening to Matt. I'm like, oh yeah, I do smell that. Yeah, so definitely the fruit is coming through. And when you said apricot, that really struck a chord for me. I really picked that up, and yeah, I agree that I think that really smell like the oakiness and the wine barrel is kind of especially in contrast with the last one we were tasting the Basil Hayden.
Yeah.
So
yeah, good point. I mean, that's a great contrast. You think about the Basil Hayden, you're getting that corn, that sweetness a little bit, but you're getting that rye, that mintiness from the rye. You're not getting any type of really fruity, heavy fruit aromas like you get off of this one. So that's a great point. So Zach, let's talk about the company itself, ZBiotics. Can you talk a little bit about, the founding, when that was done, and then how you progressed and ended up creating the product that we've talked about a little bit tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. So company got started. I really had, like I say, this idea for a genetically engineered probiotic, or really building a category of genetically engineered probiotics. And so went out and applied for a little bit of funding, just based on the idea. It was a sort of a 0 to 1. Honestly, I wasn't even going to. I didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur. Thought of myself as a scientist. And I've been talking about the idea with some friends, and they ended up starting a company, and they had applied to a startup accelerator, and they said, hey, you should apply to this accelerator as well with your idea. And so I was like, it's not really a business, it's just an idea. And like, what's there hurt to apply? And so I said, all right, fine. And so I sort of, thought it'd be fun. I put together an application, spent a couple of hours on the weekend, and submitted it, and just so happened to kind of get $20,000 to get the company started, which was just enough to convince me to sort of quit my job and give it a try.
Yeah.
So it's great. I started on this adventure, and I'm like, all right, here goes. And realizing then very quickly that $20,000 was not very much money to get a company going. But went and mostly use that time to kind of refine the pitch, refine the business plan, make sure I understood what I was doing beyond just kind of the science experiment. Also securing some lab space so that I could kind of start doing the science, and was able to pull the story together enough, and through the accelerator program get enough interest to get a reasonable amount of money. So raised like about $300,000, which was great, and that was enough to really get serious about. I was able to get lab space and kind of get to work, and spent that first year just working on the science, right? Just me alone in the lab, cranking away, trying to make a bacteria that could express a protein that would be valuable or useful. And so it took me almost to the day, it took me a year working in the lab to kind of get that first prototype that was able to break down acetaldehyde. And so it was honestly, when I look back, it was a really fun time in the company because it was just sort of like singular focus, head down, get the science working. So yeah, that was a blast.
Very cool. So you started 2016. So it took you about a year to actually, that was going to be one of my questions. How long did it take you to get the product where you're like, okay, this is going to work? So it was about a year that you actually did that. Okay.
So yeah,
That's
year was
impressive.
Yeah, that year, it was eat, sleep, do science, right? And just head down. In fact, I literally, in the early days, like very cliche, had a sleeping bag under my lab bench, literally would sleep in the lab, sometimes at night. And so, but, out of enjoyment of what I was doing, to be clear. And 1 year in, I had a prototype. I had a bacterial strain that I'd engineered that could break down acetaldehyde. And so then that, of course, is the key ingredient, but then we had to turn that into a product and brand that and sell that to consumers. And now we're getting into areas that are really outside of my area of expertise. So 2017, great, I've got this bacteria, I've tested it, I've tried it, I've tested it in the lab, all that kind of stuff. Really happy with what the bacteria can do, but now we got to turn this into a product at a company. And so that's when I found my co-founder, Steven, who very different background than me. He's a JD MBA, so 2 degrees for the price of 1, does everything else. Like, so I'm product and science, and then he's like, if the product is mine, the company and the business is his. So he kind of built everything up. We worked together on getting the manufacturing, getting the regulatory, starting to do the early market testing and discovery, what the product would look like in this final form factor, all that kind of stuff. And so it took us another 2 years after that in order for us to be able to launch the first product. So we launched the product in August of 2019. So a little over 3 years after the company got started. So 1 year for the science and the R&D, and then another 2 years to kind of commercialize it.
So during this time, I'm just curious, man. So you did this, you're doing this, you're working nonstop. You're like Elon Musking it. You're sleeping in the floor. You're there. You're doing all this stuff. Did your friends and family were they just like, you're crazy, Zach, you just need to step away and just rethink, and let's just go back and do what was comfortable. Let's do what you're already doing. You were making money at it. You're doing, I mean, did you have that kind of
I think everybody was, it was more, I think, it was more that people were kind of like, what are you doing? What exactly is this? Like, and in the early days, I wasn't particularly good at like really explaining that, right? Like I was just like a scientist, and I was like, look, this is gonna be cool, I promise, and like sort of, and so I think they were kind of like more thinking like is this like I never expressed any interest or had any skill at like building a company, and so I think they sort of thought it was like this weird little like kind of like silly kind of side project, and it's like is this and trying to convince them that this was something like really exciting and really different was a skill I had to learn, but I got better and better at it and painting the picture of what we're really trying to build. And then I think slowly but surely my friends started to kind of and family and stuff got to understand like at least that I was passionate about it and that the vision was there, and then whether or not I could execute on that was a different question. But yeah, I mean, I think that I was able to kind of paint that picture, and so that was, and honestly, that was really important for me too. Was like, can I actually, like, if I can't convince the people who know me, then how am I going to convince everybody else? So yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of a good point. Let's kind of segue from that, talking about the science part of it and talking about, explaining what you're doing and everything. Let's talk about that. Can we talk about really the science of what is behind this and the product itself, and what you're doing and what the product actually does and how it actually works?
Totally. Yeah. Like, so I think it's important. I've been talking a lot about acetaldehyde, but why does that even matter? Right. So it might be helpful to explain, like, so when you drink, you drink the alcohol, it goes into your stomach and then your intestines, and then most of that alcohol gets absorbed directly into the bloodstream. So the ethanol, right, gets absorbed into the bloodstream. It circulates throughout the body, and it has the effects that ethanol has, and then it makes its way to the liver. And the liver breaks the ethanol down in 2 stages, from ethanol to acetaldehyde, and then from acetaldehyde to acetate. And then so each of those steps is done by a separate enzyme. The good news is, so I'd say that intermediate acetaldehyde is highly toxic, much more toxic than alcohol itself. It sort of can cause all kinds of problems in the body and sort of wreak havoc. But the good news is that your liver is very good at both steps of this reaction. So all that alcohol that you absorb in the bloodstream that makes it to the liver gets processed from alcohol to acetate, alcohol to acetaldehyde, and acetaldehyde to acetate very quickly. And that acetate is essentially vinegar. It's innocuous. So at that point, sort of the alcohol has been detoxified. Now, a small amount of the alcohol you drink, basically when it makes it to the gut, it gets broken down directly in the gut by your microbiome before it can be absorbed into the bloodstream. And so from the perspective of like intoxication, this is not a very meaningful amount of alcohol. But all of this alcohol that's been broken down in the microbiome is being converted from alcohol into acetaldehyde, but not subsequently into acetate. And so even though it's a small amount of alcohol that's being broken down there, it's all being converted to acetaldehyde. So the gut or the colon ends up being the major source of acetaldehyde in the body. And so then this acetaldehyde is highly soluble. It leaks out of the gut into the bloodstream, wreaks havoc throughout your body, makes its way to the liver, and then it's broken down very efficiently in the liver. But that problem is at that point it's too late. And so the idea with ZBiotics was like, well, if the gut is the major source of acetaldehyde, and we know this to be true, right? Like it's well established in the scientific literature that the levels of acetaldehyde in the gut and the colon are 5 to 10 times higher than the bloodstream when you're drinking. And then so it's sort of like the slow leak and release of acetaldehyde from the gut all night long. And so if we could basically move that function of the liver to convert acetaldehyde into acetate, if we could move that into the gut, then we could break down that acetaldehyde before it has a chance to wreak havoc throughout the body. And so that was the idea, right? It's like simple biological function that we know already exists. And then we have this bacteria, which is an agent that can perform a biological function. And so it was kind of like this idea when we kind of put those pieces together that we could engineer the bacteria to perform the function of your liver, but do it in the gut. And the result would be that you feel much better the day after drinking. And so that was the hypothesis when I set out to build ZBiotics. And so we built it and we tested it, and we got a lot of, experiences that were consistent with that hypothesis, that validated that hypothesis, which was really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've had experiences with it. I can validate that hypothesis as well. Matt and I both had experiences. So, but no, I mean, we did, and here's the thing. Like I said, Dave Mandel told me about it, and Dave is such a believer in the product. And, I know he'll have 2 or 3 drinks, and we've talked about this, because Dave and I are about the same age. We're a little bit older. So it's not, to have 2 or 3 drinks at our age versus having 2 or 3 drinks when you're 20 years younger. I mean, it's different. Your body just reacts differently, right? So he will drink the pre-alcohol drink before he drinks anything, just because he wants to have, he wants to feel good the next day, and he doesn't want to have any lingering after effects that you might otherwise have. So, I believe David, I trust David, but I think there's a part of me that was kind of skeptical. I'm like, I'm like, is this really the truth? And, Matt and I both had the samples before the Bourbon Festival. Mm-hmm. We talked about that before we started. The Bourbon Festival, there's 100, I don't know, whatever distilleries down there. And, we know a lot of these people. We've had them on the show, and everybody says, hey, take a sample. Here's a sample. Here's a sample. And you're enjoying conversation. You're having a great day. And you don't set out to drink a lot. You just go and you're just having conversation with people in the industry, but you are consuming more alcohol than you normally would. So we both had that opportunity to have the ZBiotics the drink prior to the Bourbon Festival, and for me definitely woke up Saturday the day after, and I would say that I probably felt better than I deserved to feel. I think that may be the best way to phrase it. So, and then same thing with the Bourbon on the Banks Festival, same kind of principle. You're walking around, you're talking to people, you're taking little samples, and they're not big pours. They're just little 1/4 ounce, pours, but you do that, 10 or 15 different times, and it adds up. It really does. But then to wake up the next morning and be like, okay, I'm ready to go. I can go about my normal routine. And especially, like I said, as an older person, it makes a difference. So I'm a believer, but I'm assuming you probably encounter skeptics along the way,
No doubt. I mean, I don't think I've ever pitched this company or this product without at least getting either a literal or a proverbial eye roll, right? Like, it's a lot of skepticism in the category, right? There's a lot of snake oil out there. It's kind of one of these problems that, like, it just sort of felt like, if you've dabbled in it for long enough, you just assume that it's unsolvable. And so then, we all go through that phase where like, oh, we'll figure it out. And then you realize you can't. And then you kind of move on. And so we're sort of combating that skepticism. And it's good, right? Like, it's good that people are skeptical. I think it's very scientific to question
Sure.
kind of those things. And so, recognizing, but that's the hurdle that we have to get over every time with people, is kind of explaining the science and and like why this is different and why it's a different approach, and letting people try the product, and and all that kind of stuff. It is really important part of getting people over that skepticism hump, for sure.
Sure. And look, I'm here to tell people, just trust the science. I mean, that's the tagline, right? Just trust the science. So guys, let's jump back to the Legent. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Let's do some more alcohol to acetaldehyde, conversions.
That's right.
Here,
Yeah. That's right. Let's see what the ZBiotic pre-alcohol probiotic drink can actually do here for us. So Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this Legent?
It's funny that we're talking about the actual science behind it here, because it seemed like the science between my friends and I, everybody had their own science, whether it was like Taco Bell midnight or
right.
I had another friend that was like orange juice in the morning.
Or right.
Who knows what it was, but everybody had their own thing that seemed to work. I went through a phase where it was pretzels. But this is actual science, not just not just our independent science here. But anyway, back to the Legent. It's good. It's rich, and it's got a really bold, rich flavor to it. I think a lot of those red wine fruits come through. A lot of the plum, cherry. Like it's a little bit darker, even maybe some of like the blackberry or currant. Maybe even like a dark chocolate on it as well. But then the finish brings a little bit of heat. There is some spice.
Yep.
A little bit reminds you that you're not just drinking like a higher alcohol red wine. This is actually still some bourbon or some whiskey in there that tastes really good. And I think this is done really well. I forgot how much I really enjoy this.
Yeah, and I forgot that this is 94 proof. So again, you're not talking about a super high proof bourbon here. But Matt, I agree. I think that surprised me the most. I was expecting those fruits on the palate. I was expecting to get those profiles and the bourbon profile as well. But that spiciness really kind of surprised me on the palate and the finish, that it lingered like that, but that it also hit. That because I'm assuming this is probably the regular beam mash bill, which isn't a high rye. There's not a lot of rye in a Jim Beam, the standard mash bill. I think it's maybe 13% or something like that, 12, 13 maybe. So not a lot, but still it comes through. And like you said, Matt, it reminds you get those fruity notes, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I'm drinking a bourbon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, forgot about that. Zach, what about you? Anything that stands out with you?
I mean, I think it's a really fun one to drink. It's sort of, like I really like what you said, Matt. I definitely get sort of that almost like chocolatey, like kind of velvety flavor, but then it really ends with like a kind of a spicy tingle, it's a lot of fun. So yeah. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. And this is one you suggested, Zach. So thank you for that. Cause like I said, it's been a hot minute since I've enjoyed this. And like Matt said, I kind of forgot how enjoyable this really is. Cause it's nice. And this is I think it was like $40, reasonably priced, somewhere around there. It's not that expensive of a pour. So yeah, good call, Zach. Thanks, man.
Well, my brother sent it to me as a birthday gift a couple of years ago, and I was like, "You got to try this out. It's totally, it's pretty interesting and unique, and it is a lot of fun."
Yeah, I'm gonna have to crack open the new one that they came up with that I haven't opened yet, so just to see what it's like, because this has really piqued my curiosity for sure. So I tell you what, guys, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors. We'll come back with more with Zack Abbott, the CEO from ZBiotics, in just a minute.
Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
From our good friends at The Stave comes Lexington's newest hotspot to meet up with friends, have fun, and eat some great food. District 7 Social is a social and beer hall, but it's a lot more than that. Located in Lexington's Distillery District, it's the home of Lexington's first duck pin bowling lanes, and it also features a self-serve beer wall. That's right, self-serve. And if you want more, they've got it. You can try one of their delicious cocktails from the bar, or order some great German fusion food, from their on-site eatery, Germanish. So what are you waiting for? Be seen, be social. District 7 Social. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, it's still my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there, man?
Mark, I'm doing great. How are you in Mission Control? Everything good? Is the ship in ship shape?
Yeah, doing good. You know, I'm happy you didn't leave, before round 3, so appreciate you sticking around, Matt.
As long as the fireplace is on, I'll sit in front of this thing.
Man, I came down like 45 minutes early tonight just to turn that on, just to warm it up, take the chill off the basement for, I didn't want you to be uncomfortable. But
what a guy.
I try to look out for you, Matt. I got to take care. After 4 years, man, you deserve that kind of treatment.
What a guy. I deserve a fireplace, a nice warm glass of milk before bed, all the stuff you treat me to.
Oh, gosh. Wow. This
enough
deep.
about us
let's
here.
Jump back
Please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You can tell we've had a couple, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. I should probably thank our sponsors. We appreciate our sponsors, of course, everything they do for us. I couldn't do the show without their support. So thank you all for all that. Matt, with that said, would you like to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. Zack Abbott is the CEO of ZBiotics, and he has made it through the first 2 rounds. So we are so glad that he didn't take off on us in the third and final round. Zack, welcome on back to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Good to be back. Excited for round 3.
Yeah, definitely, man. So before we jump in, let's talk about what we have poured up on this round. This was another suggestion from Zach. We were just like trying to figure out what we had jointly. This is one, I used this as an excuse to go pick this bottle up because I thought I had a bottle and I didn't. So I did get to go pick up a bottle of the Russell's Reserve. This is the single barrel rye. This one comes in, I believe it's 104 proof. Yeah, non-age stated. 51% corn, 37% rye. I'm sorry. It's not 51.
Yeah, that's not
51%,
right. That couldn't be right.
51% rye. I'm sorry. I messed my notes up. 37% corn and 12% malted barley. So the barely legal Kentucky kind of rye where it's just meets the minimum threshold, 51%. But Matt, what do you pick up on this one in terms of the nose, man?
Well, before we go to the nose, I'm going to pose a question, Mark and Zach, to both of you.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit quick about just the taste and the flavor of the ZBiotics? Zach, is it supposed to have any sort of a flavor or a taste? Because you both have just had it before we started the show. I want to make sure that we get on there so people know what to expect, right?
Yeah.
Let me give my tasting notes first, Zach, and
Please
you
do.
can give the official notes because to me it almost had like a citrusy flavor to it. I don't want to say lemon, but there was something very citrusy to me. A light citrus, not heavy. Very clean tasting. Nothing that's like it's not medicinal or anything like that. It's a very small. What'd you say? It's like a half ounce or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
So not a lot there, but to me, it was almost like a light citrus type of a flavor to it. So what's the official?
Yeah, you nailed it. So
Okay.
We wanted to formulate something. So naturally, it kind of the bacteria in the water don't really have any flavor, and we wanted to provide a little bit of flavor because we wanted people to kind of have an experience with the product. But that being said, we anticipated that people would be drinking this before drinking, a fine wine or a nice bourbon or whatever. And so we didn't want it to be something that was aggressive or lingered, and we want something like simple and clean. And so in addition, like in terms of stability of the product, we need to keep it at a pretty low pH, which makes it naturally tart. And so we just kind of leaned into that a little bit. And like you said, just a little bit of citrus on top of that, but meant to be very mild, crisp, clean, and kind of not linger. So your notes are exactly what we were going for. So that's great. Yeah.
Yes. Matt, I finally got tasting notes right.
You nailed it, man. I gotta give it to you there.
But the clean, I mean, seriously, the clean it is. I mean, it's weird to describe something as crisp and clean unless it's 7-Up. But but it was. I mean, it really is. You drink it and it's like, oh, okay. There's a hint of citrus, but it's just a very clean finishing. It doesn't linger. You taste it. It's enjoyable, but then it's gone. So it's almost like a palate cleanser as well. You're talking about you don't want it lingering and sticking around for people that are going to be tasting fine wines or drinking fine bourbons or ryes or whatever. So that makes great sense. So I'm glad I got the tasting notes right on that, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. All right, Matt. So now you're on the hot spot again with the nosing notes on this single barrel Russell's Reserve Rye.
Yeah, it makes sense that it is a 51% rye. I don't get a whole ton of the big, bold rye spice. To me, any of the rye on here comes across kind of herbal. There's like a slight hay or a rye grain note to it. I'm actually picking up an aroma I haven't picked out in quite a while, but it has like a honeysuckle, kind of a sweet floral honeysuckle type nose. Then the corn really starts to shine. I get like subtle popcorn, sweet corn on it as well. A little bit of that rye bread aroma, but not overpowering on the rye. Certainly, I would say, if anything, hard to pick out that this would be a rye if you didn't know.
Yeah, I would agree, Matt. If you didn't know this was a rye whiskey, and I smelled and I nosed this, it would be like the whole Mike Hines episode, the initial one that we did with him, where he blinded us, and we were like, "Oh, this is a great bourbon." He's like, "Oh, that's a rye." But yeah, 51% rye. You're barely crossing that threshold. So this does have a lot of familiarity for a bourbon drinker, and I think that's obviously the intent is to get those people. We talk about gateway bourbons like Basil Hayden to get people into drinking bourbon. This is a gateway rye for bourbon drinkers or non-rye drinkers. This is the type of rye whiskey that they want to put out, that they can attract bourbon drinkers over to that rye category, because it's going to have a lot of those similar notes like Matt talked about. But you do get some of the mintiness of the rye, which we've talked about on some of the bourbon, the mintiness that came through, especially on the Basil Hayden. But you do get that corn sweetness, like from a bourbon. So you get a lot of those familiar types of notes on that. So, but it's pleasant, and it's got a really nice color, again, 104 proof. I think this is non-age stated. I don't think there's an age statement on this one at all. So, Zach, what about you? Anything on the nose that stands out to you?
I think for me, the thing that stands out the most is kind of actually doing this one after the other two, and kind of seeing actually that some of the things that really were prominent in the first two kind of are muted, and this is we shift more into the rye spectrum, so you get less of sort of like the caramel and vanilla sweetness, and a little bit more of like you said, almost like a hay and honeysuckle, like this sort of floral that kind of starts to become more prominent. So maybe it's not so much, just kind of dial down on some of the standard bourbon flavors. Smells.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. Mm-hmm. Very well said, Zach, for sure. So we've talked about, you talked about your background. We talked about the product itself, the company, how you founded it, the science behind everything. So let's kind of look at the applications beyond what you guys are doing a little bit, the kind of the future of the company and where, because there's obviously, this was the first genetically engineered probiotic, correct?
Right.
In the world, right? So obviously there's opportunities there. So it's not just this specific issue that you could address, which is great, but there's other applications. Can you talk a little bit about the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited about that, right? So definitely didn't start the company just to kind of, help everybody the day after a night out drinking, although it's a really fun and exciting kind of first use case. But really the company was built around this idea of kind of the next generation of probiotics, right? Applying biotechnology to this space that has not really seen a lot of innovation really ever. And so kind of building new products with new exciting functions. So we can literally invent new ingredients and new strains of bacteria that perform totally novel and unique functions that did not exist before. And so we're definitely not stopping here. I think this is a really exciting first use case. It's great because people can try the product and can really feel the benefit for themselves. I really like there's like a visceral readout of efficacy for the user, right? Like they could really try it out and say like, yeah, I can tell that I actually feel better, right? But there's lots of, and so that makes sense, right? When it's the world's first ever, but there's lots more that we're looking to build. And there are other companies that are also making genetically engineered probiotics. And so I'm just really excited about the kind of the future in the category. So to paint a little bit of a picture, I think we can basically, these bacteria can perform basically any biological function on the planet. And so anything that, an enzyme can do for you, or anything that a living life form can kind of perform. Like we can program that into a bacteria. And so obviously some are more difficult than others, but theoretically, like that whole world is possible. So with that in mind, we're thinking about like, what are all the things at ZBiotics, at least is how we're thinking about this, is what are all the things that you deal with in kind of modern life that are maybe unavoidable, unpleasant, things you don't, that interrupt your kind of healthy behaviors and habits. So when we think about like, sleep and exercise and performance, your ability to like, think on your feet, your mood, elements that are kind of present in highly processed food, plastic, all these things that are not, we know that are not great for us, that are very difficult to avoid, or like in the case of like exercise, like your recovery is sort of delayed because of sort of general inflammation, maybe you work out too hard, or you work out and then you drink water that has like heavy metals in it to recover, right? Like all these things can kind of get in the way of you being the best version of yourself, right? And that's biology that exists now, that is not biology that we evolved to deal with. And so the idea that we could take a probiotic bacteria and genetically engineer it to kind of like help you with this novel function, to like help you recover better from your workout, or help you recover better from poor sleep, or acquire nutrients better from your food, or protect you from like some of the nasty things that might be in your water, like heavy metals, microplastics, all these things. So I think that there's like a lot of exciting stuff that we can build, and that's how we think about it. But I also know that there are other companies out there thinking about all kinds of other exciting and interesting things to genetically engineer probiotics to do as well. So I think this future 20 years down the road, where you walk into the grocery store and there's like a whole kind of like aisle or section of like of the market that has like all of these incredible functions that you can buy that will help you kind of function better and get more out of your life and out of every day.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So it's not just like a one-hit wonder. It's not this is the only.
I hope so. Well, yeah, right now we've got one, but we have many more in the pipeline. We're excited about, nice. A second product coming out hopefully next year. Totally different use case than the first product. Same technology, but totally different. Nothing to do with alcohol or drinking. And so we're really excited about all the things that.
Perfect. I can finally eat Mexican food without having to sleep in a different room.
Yeah. Hey, we've thought about gas and stuff, definitely. So there's all kinds of good stuff. Yeah.
Well, now Zach, you're talking about working out and stuff. Matt is an Ironman, and he'll be going to Kona next year for the World Championship.
Oh, wow.
So
that's awesome.
You guys, if you got some things, that are brewing for recovery and things,
happy
Matt
to be a test subject.
Absolutely. We have multiple things that I think could help for somebody, a high performance athlete like yourself. Absolutely.
There you go. Yeah. No doubt. See, there you go, Matt. We'll get you a Bourbon Life tri-kit, and we'll have ZBiotics as well on the how's that?
Perfect.
Oh my gosh. No, that's great, man. But I mean, that's really cool. So it's like, I don't want to say reverse engineering, but it's like you think, okay, here's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, okay, can we do this? Can we engineer this to solve that problem? And is that really kind of how it works?
Yeah. I mean, it honestly is. Like when you think about, so you have this like the whole world, the whole universe of like kind of biology and problems that you might want to solve. And then you look at that and you say, like, okay, what are things that like are not a disease that a healthy person might deal with, right? Because we really want to stay in kind of this like in the consumer space where healthy people are kind of being proactive about about staying healthy, right? And so so that narrows your focus a little bit, right? And then you say like, okay, well, what are the things that we think we can have access to with the probiotic in the gut, right? And so then that narrows it further. But even still, the universe of things that we can do there is still big, right? And so we say like, okay, because you'd be surprised, I think, at how many things your gut is responsible for, right? We think of our gut as like stomach aches and food digestion, but like, I mean, your mood and the way your concentration and the way your immune system develops, and like so many things are like really evolved around the fact that we are a tube that acquires food, and then that food gets distributed, right? The nutrients get distributed and feed the whole body. And so that tube is actually really central to everything we do. And the bacteria that live in that tube are vital to like so many functions. So for instance, when you exercise, your body gets flooded with all these reactive oxygen species, And the number one thing to help you deal with that are the bacteria in your gut that produce hydrogen gas, which is the major thing that reduces those reactive oxygen species. So as an example, so like these bacteria are working on your behalf all the time. And it happens to be a byproduct of their own happy lives, like living in your gut as you feed them with the food you eat. But that being said, now that in the last 10, 15 years, we started to understand this interaction and the interplay between these bacteria and your own health and well-being, we now have levers that we can pull for human health that we did not appreciate up until very recently, which is it's a very exciting time to be a microbiologist.
I was just going to say, I mean, honestly, that's super. That's very exciting. I mean, it really is. I mean, the ability to target a problem that exists and to be able to engineer something that's, useful and good for you as well. That you're not taking some synthetically created pharmaceutical product or whatever. I mean, you've got something that you guys are using probiotics with, you're using bacteria, you're engineering it. I mean, that's super exciting. I've got rheumatoid arthritis, and that was one of the biggest things for me was lifestyle change, nutritional changes to try to change all that to correct the issues. And I've been able to be medicine free for 3 years now from RA, just from supplements and nutritional changes. But for someone like me, people that have those autoimmune types of issues, I mean, it sounds like this could open up a whole new world as well, potentially, for issues. So
I think, look, first and foremost, the idea of like synthetic, I mean, this is fundamentally synthetic, but the idea that as we understand biology better, we can start to work with biology as opposed to against it. And I think that's what's exciting, right? And so, you mentioned inflammation. I mean, it's the root cause of a lot of the issues that we deal with as humans. And one of the major agents of like regulating our inflammatory response are the bacteria in your gut, and they often tamp down that immune response. And so with dysbiosis or disruption of that microbiome, you can start to see a lot of these inflammatory diseases that people are suffering from more and more in the first world, right around like IBS and like you say, arthritis and all these things. And so there's no doubt that there's like this communication breakdown between the bacteria and the body, which means that there's as we understand that better and better, there's more and more opportunities for us to kind of positively impact that interaction.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, guys, we're almost at the end of round 3, but before we wrap it up, I want to ask you, Zach, what has been on this journey so far? Because you've been on this for quite a while now. What has been so far your favorite part of this journey?
Oh, man, it's tough to say a favorite. I mean, I'm definitely most comfortable around the science, given that's my traditional training. That being said, I think the thing that I really love the most about being an entrepreneur, which is not something I expected to be, is the opportunity to learn so many different things, right? Like, so the science is fun and that's my comfort zone, but I've had to do, I hardly ever even get to do the science anymore. I mostly am doing a lot of like company building and fundraising and, answering a lot of emails and stuff, doing interviews like this. And I really just enjoyed that a lot. I've enjoyed building a company and having people that I work with and crafting. I've had a lot of jobs in my life, and I've had some good ones and some bad ones. And being able to build a company where our goal is to have everybody really enjoy their job and really enjoy working together and have it be like a team. And that's been a lot of fun to kind of build. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it and creating a company culture where our goal is that everybody, that ZBiotics is the best job they ever had, hopefully. And so how do we make that happen together and working on that? That's been a lot of fun, and learning how to kind of translate my science and my ideas into realities and getting other people excited about it. I think I've really enjoyed doing that as well. So every day is a new day, and that's been a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Very nice. So guys, let's talk about the whiskey real quick. Let's talk about the Russell's Reserve Single Barrel Rye. Matt, what do you get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
For being that 51% rye, I think the palate really comes through with more of the rye. There's a lot more of the herbal notes, more of that mint, the spearmint, almost like a little bit of lemongrass right on the nose. The kind of that menthol, I don't want to call it like that burn, but just that cooling, minty menthol effect is definitely there. I pick up like pie crust or like some sort of a crisp, like baked crust or like that fresh rye bread taste on it as well. Then a nice kind of warming finish. I think some of the corn comes through in there as well, brings through some of the vanilla, some of the influence on the oak. But for nosing the way this did and how I didn't really think it came across too rye heavy, I think the palate really shines through with the rye on this.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. The first sip really surprised me, just because of the fact that rye influence came through so quickly. That kind of spicy aromas, the spicy palate. It's almost, I got almost like a black tea type of taste on it as well. You were talking about mintiness, Matt. I got almost kind of tannic as well, a little drying for me. Kind of surprised I wasn't expecting that, but did get a little bit almost like a black tea type of aroma or taste on it as well. But I agree, it does carry through with some of those bourbon-ish types of notes, Matt, as well. But I think the spiciness is the one thing that carries through the whole way, and it really surprised me compared to the nose. I did not anticipate that, so kind of a surprise for me. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, definitely the spiciest of the three, and I think from what you said, for me, Matt, the breadiness really was something that kind of like jumped out at me too. So I know that went along.
Yeah. All right. So Zach, we've talked about the future, kind of what it looks like for the brand, which is very exciting. I appreciate that. Where can people find more information about ZBiotics and what you guys are doing? Yeah.
So the website is the best place. That's kind of where we live. So ZBiotics.com. That's where you can learn all about. We have a lot of content about alcohol metabolism and tips for feeling better after drinking with or without ZBiotics, and how probiotics work, and anything you might be interested in related to the kind of topics we talked about today, and then of course you can learn about the product as well and how it works and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and I will tell our listeners that we have partnered with you guys on this, so we've got actually a discount code, which is great. So if they go to zbiotics.com/bourbon, they can actually get 15% off the product, which I would highly recommend. Because, like I said, man, when, I trust David. And so when he told me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to believe you, David, I'm going to trust you. But there was a level of skepticism there, but man, after I've used the product 4 different times now. So, and every time the next day I wake up, and it's, I guess that's the thing I want to clarify. It's not that we're going out and like, oh, we're going to get wild and crazy. But, I mentioned that especially now that I'm older, even having 3 or 4 drinks can just the next day can have an effect on me. So this just really helps me get to that point the next day where I wake up and I just feel better, feel refreshed, feel ready to go. And to me, that's a game changer. So yeah, I am a believer, Zach.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, you said it well, and it's an important point. We often say it's this is real science, not science fiction, and so still necessitates responsible drinking and all that, right? Like all the same rules apply. But that being said, you should wake up and be able to maintain your healthy routines and habits, get more done the next day, and especially with kind of like the holiday gauntlet coming up here, holiday parties and stuff. Good to have ZBs on hand, and not to be too much of a salesman here, but I will say that, trust I think we have really great science that backs up what the product does, but trust your own experience. And so we never want somebody to feel like they're getting bamboozled. So we do have 100% money back guarantee. So give it a try.
Nice.
If you don't like it, we'll give your money back. With no questions asked.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Zach, any final thoughts before we wrap it up tonight?
No, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. Definitely the most fun I've had in a podcast interview. I was able to try some really great bourbons and ryes, so really, really fun.
Awesome, man. We appreciate that. Matt, any final thoughts before we get out of here tonight?
Hey, Zach, thanks for picking out our lineup tonight. Stuff we were drinking and tasting on. You did a great job. Yeah. Really enjoyed going back to some of these and getting into the Russells as well. And getting to know you, hear more about the science, and hear more about ZBiotics as well has been super fun. So we're super appreciative of that. And you're a great person to be representing the company and to bringing it across. And to all our listeners, I can't think of a better stocking stuffer. So slide one of these into all the stockings.
Yeah.
Let everybody be merry.
I would agree with that, Matt. Or just buy it for your favorite podcast co-host and send them to us.
Yeah.
Use the discount code. Send us all you want. Matt and I will put them to good use. We promise you that. And we've got a lot of festivals coming up at the first of the year. So, we got we gotta keep on track with all of that stuff. But Zach, I appreciate you joining us tonight, man. This has been a lot of fun. Since we got to talk probably a month or so ago, I've been really looking forward to this. I really appreciate Dave Mandel for connecting us and introducing me to your product. And thank you guys for sending us the samples to just experience it. Like you said, to try it ourselves and to understand what you mean. So, and I've said it before, I'm a believer. It makes a difference, and I will continue to drink my ZBiotics for sure, man. So,
Great.
Well, we appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I'm very excited as well for the future with what you guys are doing, to understand this kind of emerging scientific area, and to see what's done and what you guys are capable of achieving as well on top of what you've already done. This is really, really unique stuff, and I'm really excited about that. So, but I do appreciate you joining us tonight. And with that said, well, I got to thank all of our sponsors again, of course. So thank you guys for everything. Thank all of our listeners. Like Matt always says, whatever time of day it is you're listening, morning, noon, or night, we appreciate you guys spending some time with us. And if you would like to reach out to us, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life, or join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers. We'd love to have you in there. You can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. We would really appreciate that. And with that said, I want to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.